There's three words that everyone has heard of, everyone has an opinion on, but almost no one can define. That's right. Today we are answering the question, what is critical race theory? Critical race theory is not a bunch of people standing around yelling at a white dude. It is not the criticism of the white race. We begin our journey with critical race theory in good old academia, where it begins as a theory or a way for scholars to understand information. So when we look at that information, we're understanding that race and racism, especially race and racism from the past and embedded in legal institutions, affects today. Educational scholars began using this as a way to view their information, or understanding that race and racism are deeply engaged in society and in schooling. For a lot of people, the story ends here. Critical race theory is part of academia, end of discussion, but I think this ignores the social construction of language, or that words have meanings outside of what it says in the dictionary. There are three things we need to think about when teaching students about race in today's society. One, racism is not a thing of the past. People are still acting subconsciously or consciously in ways that are informed by race. There is so much evidence of this in general, but the way I want to focus on is job applications and job acceptance. Racism in today's workplace isn't necessarily a bunch of white dudes telling a black lady she can't work here. It's the split-second decisions that happen when deciding between two similarly qualified candidates. Do we want to hire someone who's totally different than us, or do we want to hire another person who's going to go try craft beers with us on Friday? Someone who's going to be a ringer when we go to golf tournaments. The minority candidate either has to be that much more qualified to overcome these differences, or they have to embrace or pretend to embrace traditionally white cultural things to fit in. This is usually called the myth of the good fit, or that someone's cultural background, things that are totally unrelated to their job performance, are affecting whether or not they should be employed. And usually this involves embracing white dominant culture. Number two, history of racism is still relevant today. Racism from the past bleeds into racism of today, and what happened in the past created unequal opportunities that still exist today. Again, there are a lot of ways that we can look at this and understand this, but one of the easiest is through housing discrimination. Basically, redlining is separating white people and people of color and establishing the white neighborhoods as more desirable. Remember that housing isn't just housing. It determines what hospitals you have access to, what factories are in your area, how much pollution you have. It affects what schools are in your area, what kinds of jobs and education your kids are going to be exposed to, what kind of grocery stores there are, whether there are healthy options there. Many studies have shown us the long-term effects of redlining. However, this NPR article is a good overview. The vicious cycle and legacy of redlining has persisted. Residents of redline communities struggled to receive loans to buy or renovate their homes, which led to disrepair and a decline of the community's housing stock. That in turn forced businesses to close and depressed tax revenue, diminishing school funding. Today, many of the same neighborhoods that were redlined continue not only to have the highest poverty rates, but also worse health outcomes that lead to shorter lifespans. And Black Americans are nearly 5 times more likely to own a home in a formerly redlined neighborhood than in a green-lined or desirable neighborhood, resulting in less home equity than white Americans have. In general, land is wealth. That's why rich people invest in real estate all the time. Because of these racist policies and practices and laws, white Americans today have an average 13 times the wealth of the average Black American. Finally, history is a story. How we tell that story, who is included, how much disagreement, the moral of the story, the progression of that story all matter and are always political. People have been politicizing the telling of history for centuries, if not millennia. Critical race theory isn't about erasing these guys or their accomplishments. It's about understanding them complexly. It's about acknowledging, celebrating, debating, and understanding people who have been left out of the story of the United States. It's about adding in more white people and seeing where white people disagreed about things. If you don't know who any of these people are, it's because they have been removed and not celebrated or argued about in your learning of history. CRT isn't about making white people feel guilty, erasing whiteness from history, or portraying all white people as evil. It's about making all people feel seen when we tell that history. It's about understanding the ways that the past influences the present and the ways that we can use that information to make a more fair, just, and equitable future.